On the 5th Saturday of January, we end the month with our 5th review of the month and our 5th channel points request, this time coming from Silonic. And at Silonic's request, today we're going to be reviewing the Poseidon Adventure, which came out in 1972. Released in the tail end of the year, this is a disaster film about a group of people who spend their New Year's in a ship that capsizes, trying to find their way out. And I gotta say, this film was an incredible journey that got both sadder and more intense as it went on, largely due to the cast, which perfectly portrayed the direness of the situation. And that shouldn't be much of a surprise, as this film included 5 Oscar winners: Gene Hackman, Ernest Borgnine, Jack Albertson, Shelley Winters, and Red Buttons. That's about the perfect cast to get if you want an emotional journey like this, and believe me, they delivered. It also delivered at the box office, as even though it came out in late '72, it ended up being the highest grossing film of 1973, making $125 million worldwide. That would be about $733 million in 2021. So yeah, did decently well. But was this all-star cast able to survive the SS Poseidon before they all sunk with it? Well, we're about to find out right now as we review the Poseidon Adventure, 1972. So the film begins on New Year's Eve 1972 aboard the SS Poseidon. The film also begins with a title card pretty much spoiling the end of the movie, so that's kind of a dick move, but whatever. The ship is captained by a man named Harrison, who's actually portrayed by Leslie Nielsen. We then go about meeting our main characters, including Detective Mike Rogo and his wife Linda, James Martin, who appears to be some kind of single health nut, also Belle and Manny Rosen, an elderly couple who's looking to go to Israel to meet their grandson. You may recognize Jack Albertson as Manny Roseman, who also played Grandpa Joe in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Rounding off our main characters, we also meet Reverend Frank Scott, a controversial preacher who believes in the philosophy of God helps those who help themselves, basically meaning God won't do stuff for you, you have to do stuff and prove that you're fucking strong to God, and then God will help you. The church doesn't exactly agree with his teachings, and he's getting banished to Africa, basically. Going back to Captain Harrison real quick, who's having an argument with a man named Lenarkos, who is the ship owner's representative. Basically, the ship's owner wants the ship to go full speed, which Captain Harrison doesn't think is a good idea because the ship hasn't taken on enough ballast. And from my understanding, ballast is basically the thing that steadies the ship and helps it take on water, and they don't have enough of that, so you can probably see where this is going. Getting back to our main characters, we also meet a waiter, Akers, as well as Nani, who's the lead singer of the band on the ship. Rounding us off, we also meet Susan and her annoying little brother Robin, who are on their way to see their parents. So it's about to turn 1973, and everybody is attending a big party on the ship. Right before it turns midnight, though, Captain Harrison gets called back up to the bridge, and is informed that there was an underwater earthquake. And right as it turns 1973, this underwater earthquake then turns into a tsunami, which hits the ship dead on. The ship then capsizes, which means it's literally floating upside down. So the captain and the rest of his crew are all dead, and there's a lot of dead passengers as well. The purser of the ship, who's still alive, doesn't believe that though, and wants everybody to stay put until help arrives. However, Scott sees Akers up on a platform and devises that in order to get out of there, they need to go up. Martin tries to convince the others to come with, but aside from the other main characters, nobody wants to do it. Nani is majorly distraught over her brother being dead, but she's a main character, so Martin's able to convince her to go. They use a Christmas tree to get themselves up to the platform, and Scott tries one more time to appeal to the others to come up, to which they refuse. And maybe they shouldn't have, because then water breaks for the ship, and they all try to frantically get up the Christmas tree, and it topples over, which basically leaves them all to die. So Scott has set a goal of finding the engine room, as he believes that is their ticket out of here, and they begin making their way for the ship. All the while, they're also narrowly avoiding the ever-rising water. They eventually go for a tunnel and find a ladder and begin to climb up, and they all almost make it until there's another explosion and Akers falls to his death. They then meet up with a large other group of survivors led by a doctor who believes the way to go is to the ship's bow. Scott screams at them that they're going the wrong way, but they don't really care and just keep going that way anyway. Scott and Rogo then begin to fight, and they make a bet. Scott has 15 minutes to find the engine room, and if he doesn't find it, they'll go to the bow with the other survivors. Scott is accompanied by Susan, and it does take him a little bit over 15 minutes, but he does find a way to the engine room. In order to get there though, they're going to have to swim down through a hallway to get up to the engine room, which is still above water. And in order to do that, somebody's going to have to swim through first, leading a rope for the others to follow. Belle reveals that she was a championship swimmer and offers to do it, but Scott takes the initiative and goes off with the rope. Halfway through though, Scott gets stuck when a panel collapses on him, which causes Belle to go in after him and barely save him. However, once they reach the engine room, Belle suffers a heart attack and unfortunately dies. Before she dies though, she tells Scott to give Manny her pendant in order to give it to their grandson when Manny meets him. They all eventually make it through the end, but Manny is completely distraught at the sight of seeing Belle dead. Scott gives him the pendant though and reminds him of what his wife wanted, and Manny agrees to come with. So they're almost home free. They just have to climb this broken ass platform to reach the propeller shaft room. As they're almost there however, there's more explosions, which causes Linda to fall to her doom. Rogo is completely distraught at this point and rants and blames Scott for Linda's death. And to make matters worse, a steam pipe also breaks, which causes hot steam to block their path to the door. And at this point, Reverend Frank Scott has had just about enough of this shit. He yells at God and says, "Fuck it, take me," and he jumps onto a burning hot valve, which he's able to twist and turn off the steam. There's nowhere else for him to go though, and he tells Rogo to lead the group out of there before he too falls to his doom. They reach the propeller shaft and are not quite sure what to do now, but Robin tells Rogo that the metal above is only 1 inch thick, so they start banging on it to attract attention. And believe it or not, a rescue crew does hear them, and they begin cutting through the hole. Once the rescue crew are through, they ask them if anyone else survived, and nope. They're the only ones. They're then taken onto a helicopter and lifted the hell on out of there, the only 6 survivors of the SS Poseidon. So with how good this film was, you might be wondering, were there any sequels or remakes? Yes, there was both actually. There was a sequel in '79 called Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, and 2 remakes, one in 2005 which was for television, and one in theaters the next year in '06. Unfortunately, while I don't know much about the '05 version, the '79 sequel as well as the '06 remake were both financial flops. Although the '06 remake did win an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, so had that going for it. But honestly, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't know what to expect going into this film, but I really did enjoy it a lot. I wasn't the only one either, as this film ended up winning 2 Academy Awards, a Golden Globe Award, a British Academy Film Award, and a Motion Picture Sound Editors Award. It's also considered one of the 4 main all-star disaster films in the early to mid-70s, including Airport, Earthquake, and The Towering Inferno. What's crazy to me though is that this is seen by some as a good bad movie. John Wilson, who was the founder of the Razzie Awards, named this one of the top 100 most enjoyably bad movies ever made. I don't really get that. To be honest, I thought it was a legitimately good film. I feel like I'm not in the minority there either. This is an all-star, incredibly well-acted, incredibly well-written film. And honestly, this is the first time I had ever seen it, reviewing it for this film. I had never seen it before, but I enjoyed it a lot. So if you're looking for a good, fun, early 70s disaster movie and you enjoy films like Airplane or Towering Inferno, I would recommend The Poseidon Adventure. I thought it was very good, and a very good way to end January for the review channel. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to do it for me today. Thank you again, Solonic, for using your channel points on this, and thank you all for watching. If you want to follow any of my social media links, they're all in the description down below. Thank you to all 62 of my patrons, also named in the description, for supporting me and my channels. With all that being said, though, my name is Noah Taft. This has been my review of The Poseidon Adventure, 1972, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.